this is a more generalistic conference. I think there would have to be definitely, I think Nadeem's idea was to get many people to speak up so that a platform for debate starts, and issues are spread out and then defined so that people can take on those issues. It's a start. We should now in the next phase get issues defined and get this debate rolling and try and get further with these talks.
And I think you're absolutely right that in our country sometimes there is a rush to make a policy and that it is not backed up by enough hard work and thinking. So we have to, think about what are the optimal size, what are the limits, and how one might try to prevent reaching a situation which is so completely unmanageable, so completely out of control, and which replicates the lessons, of the other developing countries.
Economy is an aggregation of cities. Productivity is a city phenomenon. City GDP is what matters. Rural GDP will always decline, as in history. Cities attract investment, education, and innovation. Society and culture is developed in cities. All social development in cities, all major movements, Reformation, Renaissance, and Enlightenment, and indeed revolution happened in cities.
Well, I think it's necessary to have some deliberations on these issues because these are very critical, very crucial to the survival of humankind and all life on this planet.
The importance of cities is likely to grow because of globalization. As you rightly said, in one sense, globalization is really interlocking or interconnecting of city centers. And so as globalization demands more competitiveness, as globalization demands more innovation, as globalization demands higher productivity levels, cities and what happens in them and how they are configured and how they respond and how they attract, because of their quality of life, the right kind of people will determine, in a sense, the competitive edge of nations and indeed regions.
Every country needs policy ideas, needs policy research to develop policy ideas. All kinds of human intervention into any society is basically policy. And policy has to be based on thinking and research. And our motivation for holding this conference was to develop thinking and research on the subject of cities. PID's role is that of a think tank. Every country has a think tank. We've had it all the way from Plato's Academy to now. A think tank's job is just to raise questions and do research. And our job is just that. Think tank's third job is to educate people. We educate people. With the education of people, you have a demand for change. When there is a demand for change, change always happens. If you think about it, when people began to understand trade liberalization and openness, change happened. When people began to think about independence, change happened. The important thing is for people to understand the issue.
The purpose of the rural-urban concept which has been introduced in Pakistan, the interpretation must be clear in your minds. The purpose of rural-urban divide was not to declare that all the areas in Pakistan have become urbanized as soon as the local government ordinance has been implemented. The purpose was that each and every inch of Pakistan must receive the attention of the decision makers at the local level, at the provincial level, and at the federal level with respect to development. The purpose is coherent development in all parts of the country and simultaneously.
What is urban? This is another issue that you find in literature: rural-urban dichotomy, rural-urban continuum, rural-urban divide, urban-rural conflict. We have so many terms, but still we don't know what really is urban and what really is rural. As Friedman says, that many of the aspects of urban and rural living, which have seemed to distinguish the two types of areas, may be losing their distinctive characters. And another author says that these terms are the opposite ends of the common scale, and no line of sharp demarcation can be struck through it, dividing justly that which is rural from that which is urban. One imperceptibly melds into the other. So we know that we don't really know what is urban and what is rural.
The law says either all areas are rural or all areas are urban. So if we believe that the city district government all are urban, then there has to be an urbanization process, and there is urbanization. Even if we delete the word urban from the law, the urban areas are there. Just like I would question that we are talking about cities since morning, but in the local government ordinance there is no use of the word city. There are no cities under the law in Pakistan as such, if you ask me.
There are too many small towns in Pakistan now that may be actually cities. For example, a town like Khushab or a town like Thatta, I mean, these are not small towns anymore. Some of these towns are larger than American cities, population-wise, right? The way I like to look at it is that somehow we have to, these towns themselves have to get the message out, and we have to get the message out. That, hey, there may be a town out there, Targoda for example, with 1 million+ people. That's not a small town. That 1 million+ people represents a market. And once the townspeople realize that they have a market, they start selling themselves to the market. And the corporations recognize that they're a market. Very quickly modernization follows.
The task of city management is becoming very important and very complex. A city needs planning, it needs regulation, it needs zoning, it needs taxation, it needs implementation of projects, it needs a good preservation strategy, it needs to be projected, and all these things have to be done under an administration, under a machinery that is able to take decisions, that is able to implement those decisions, and that is able to project itself and the city in an environment which demands transparency and which demands efficiency.
33% of the land comes under the city district government of Karachi, and the rest has 13 institutions which own the land in the city. So the city Nazim, when he's working, he's blamed, and people don't know what is which land comes under which institution or organization. The whole city needs to come under the city Nazim if you really want effective governance.
एक तो ये बहुत अहम है कि डिस्ट्रिक्ट सर्विस बने, क्योंकि डिस्ट्रिक्ट सर्विस के बनने से ही मुकामी सतह पर जो इंतजामिया है वो फाइनली रिस्पॉन्सिबल होगी अपनी लोकल गवर्नमेंट को. इस तरह इस वक्त जो प्रोविंशियल और फेडरल और सर्वेंट्स ऑफ लोकल काउंसिल और लोकल काउंसिल सर्वेंट्स और कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एम्प्लॉइज और NGOs और ये सब कुछ जो डिस्ट्रिक्ट के स्फीयर में काम कर रहे हैं, इसके ऊपर डिस्ट्रिक्ट का कोई कंट्रोल नहीं है, और वो कंट्रोल ना होने की वजह से वो उसको इफेक्टिवली इस्तेमाल नहीं कर सकते, चाहे वो पोस्टिंग एंड ट्रांसफर हो, रिक्रूटमेंट हो, प्रमोशंस के इशूज हों, सजा और जजा का निज़ाम सादे अल्फाजों में.
We have government, we have bureaucracy, we have donors, civil society, elected representative, private sector, poor citizen, rich citizen. So this engine has become very confused now when it comes into the public sector, and there are too many drivers in there.
The devolution exercise grafts on to an administrative structure that is essentially federal, because the civil service is controlled federally. It is a federal civil service. Even the provincial secretaries are on loan from the federal civil service. Even the DCOs are on loan from the federal civil service. How do you graft a civil administration system decentralized on a federal system that is so centrally and surgically controlled?
Urban sprawl, this movement of the population into the large cities, created what I have referred to as the ruralization of our urban areas. Actually,